Our last example today has yet another interesting element to it. Looking at it initially, you'll notice that there is both a cosine and a sine in here. And once again, one of those is squared. So I can use my, my basic Pythagorean identity to switch it. So this one that's squared, this cosine squared of x, I'm going to replace it with 1 minus sine squared of x. So that way the only trig expression that I'm experiencing within this problem is just sine squared. Now I'm going to distribute that 4 to get rid of the extra parentheses that are there. So that would give me 4 minus 4 sine squared of x. And so once again, I recognize that I have both a sine squared and a sine. So this is going to be a quadratic form type trigonometric equation. So my strategy for solving it is going to be to create a 0 on one side, and then I'll try factoring first. And if factoring does not work, then we can talk about other techniques. I already have a 0 on one side. On the left, though, I do have two constants. So I'm going to go ahead and add those two constants together. The constants were 4 and -1. I got a little messy, so I'm going to try again. So -4 sine squared x plus 4 sine of x, and then 4 minus 1 is a +3. Okay, personally, I don't like factoring when my squared term is negative, has a negative coefficient. So I'm going to multiply everything in this equation by a -1. By everything, I mean everything on both sides. So times -1. That'll change the signs on everything for me. So that'll give me +4 sine squared of x, minus 4 sine of x, and then -3. All right, now, in order to factor this one, here's what I'm really thinking of. I'm going to use a quick little substitution just to help clarify what you're seeing here. I'm going to put in a u anytime I see a sine of x in this equation. So if I do that, it would say 4u squared minus 4u minus 3. So this is now very clearly a quadratic equation. In order to factor it, I would multiply the 4 and the -3 together, so that gives me -12. I'm looking for things that'll multiply to make -12 and add to make -4. So after a quick run through my factors there, that would be -6 and 2. So I know this is going to factor. So I could go ahead and set up my two sets of parentheses there. Then to get that 4u squared, I have two options. I could either rewrite the 4 as 2 times 2 or as 4 times 1. Now, keeping in mind that my outside and my inside products need to be a -6 and a +2, if I were to put in a 4, then I wouldn't be able to get either of those numbers. So I'm going to rewrite the 4u squared as 2u and 2u. Then my outside product, 2 times something, I'm going to make the -6 for this one. So I would put a -3 there. And the 2, this other 2 times whatever I put in this other blank has to be a +2, so that would be a +1. And so this is now factored, and I could then set each of those factors equal to 0 and solve. But I want to go back and do this with the trigonometry in it instead. So now I'm looking at this equation and I'm seeing it like 4u squared minus 4u minus 3 equals 0. So I would follow the same strategy. I'd say, okay, well, I'm multiplying the initial 4 and the last -3 together, I get -12. And I would need things that multiply to make that -12 and add to make the -4 that's in the middle. So -6 and 2. Again, that 4 that's in the front, I would rewrite it as 2 and 2 so that I can make both a 6 and a 2. Then my outside product, 2 times whatever I put on the end over here, I'm going to make the -6. So I'm going to put -3 there. And then the other 2 times what I put in the other blank has to be the other number, which is +2. So I would need a 1 times that 2. Now that it's factored, I can set each of those factors equal to 0 and then solve them. All right, so for this first one, I would subtract 1 from both sides and then divide by 2. So I would get sine of x is equal to -1/2. For the second one, I would have to add 3 to both sides and then divide by 2. So that would give me 3/2. All right, now I've got the trig expression by itself, so I'm ready to start looking for my angles. So sine of x is equal to -1/2. Sine is the y value on the unit circle, and the y values are negative in quadrants 3 and 4. So I'm going to look for an answer in quadrant 3 and an answer in quadrant 4. My reference angle that gives me a y value of 1/2 is pi/6. So the pi/6 angle in quadrant 3 is 7 pi/6. And in quadrant 4, it is 11 pi/6. And then I move to the other equation here. So I'm looking at this one here. So I need sine of x to be 3/2. Now, when we were studying the functions, the graphs of sine of x and cosine of x, we found that the range of that bounced between -1 and +1. And the value that I have here that it's supposed to equal is 1.5, which is outside of that range. So that actually means that there is no solution to this one over here. So even though algebraically I was able to come up with that as one of my factors and solve it, this piece of it is not going to give me any additional solutions. So all of my solutions for this equation on the interval from 0 to 2 pi is just 7 pi/6 and 11 pi/6. So just 2 answers for this one. All right, now you're going to try this one and answer on the Google form.